All right, y'all, let's kick it off. I can't believe we are here now. It is the last episode of season 3 for Creator Tea Talk, which is absolutely insane. I feel like if you've been following me for a while, you know that in the previous episodes I've done, well, they've kind of evolved over the years, have gone by. When I first started this series on LinkedIn, it was just all audio. And then we switched over to video. And then I was doing those, I think, twice a month. And then this year I was like, I ain't got time for all that. So we're doing them once a month. And this has been a great flow that I've been able to work with. So it's been amazing to see that we are now at the end of season 3. Season 4 is definitely going to come back, which I'm also excited for. But if you are new here, Creator Tea Talk is an event series that I run, and it's evolved into a lot of things. It's a community event series, a brand and education forum for creators and creator economy professionals to have transparent conversations about the creator economy, aka this is where we spill the tea, which is why it's called Creator Tea Talk. And one of the benefits of me being a host of Creator Tea Talk is that you get to hear me spill a lot of my own tea, which is what we're going to be doing today, because this is a ask me anything, or I will say, and ask me almost anything. So I will share what I am able to and contractually allowed to share. So I'm excited to have you all here. You can go ahead and start putting in your questions in the comments. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is talk through like some of the recent updates with Creator Tea Talk. So the first update, if you didn't know, and you can kind of tell from how this live kind of looks, if you can tell by the branding, I'm not sure how if it's coming fully across on LinkedIn. But Creator Tea Talk got a rebrand, and that is probably one of the most exciting things I got to experience this year. I worked with a really incredible designer named Alyssa who worked on that for me. And not only was it a rebrand, it's also a brand new website. So we worked really hard on pulling together a lot of resources and just information that you guys can have when you have questions about anything relating to the creator economy that I may not immediately be able to answer. On my resources page, I have the Creator Tea Talk toolkit. And then I have access to my webinars, my courses and my digital downloads and all the events that I'm hosting, which is very exciting. And then additionally, I just did my last Creator Tea Talk event of the year. In-person event. Technically, this is the last event. So the last in-person event of the year here in Atlanta. And we had about 125 creators. I did it in partnership with Creators for Mental Health that's run by Shira Lazar. And then Influential, which is one of the largest influencer marketing agencies in the world. And I did that in partnership with Nefertari Cooper. And it went so well, and I'm excited. I'm already ideating on the events that I'm going to do next year. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter on jaydepowell.com. And that's where you can get a lot of information on what's next for Creator Tea Talk. But let's get into these questions, y'all. Like I said, this is an AMA, so we're going to get into it. So let's see. What are some of the questions that I've seen so far? Okay, let's start with Alexis. So Alexis said, going into the new year, how do you personally audit your creative direction and business so you know what to keep, adjust, or drop? I love that question. So I think for me, a lot of how I'm figuring out what I'm going to like continue to implement or just decide to put a pin in or 86 completely is really just me operating on vibes and figuring it out as I go along. But one thing I will say is I feel like one thing that has been very consistent about me is that I do things based on the energy and capacity I feel like I have. So if I'm feeling like things are serving my goals or my purpose in life in the moment, that's what I will continue to focus on. But if I feel like this is no longer something that needs to be a part of my mission or my day-to-day life, that's when I know to drop it. And I'll give an example. I think actually the one I gave at the beginning. So when this show started, I was like, okay, I'm going to do these LinkedIn Lives twice a month. And then as my business grew and I wasn't able to stretch myself that thin, I was like, okay, this is getting a little bit stressful trying to manage these every month. So then I was like, I'm going to scale back. I'm still going to do the lives. I'm just going to scale back a little bit. So I was like, first, I'm just going to do the one a month. And then two, I'm going to scale back on the number of participants that come on the show and speak on the panel with me. So now I think I'm only doing three additional people, including me. So four people total. Before, y'all, I had like six, seven, sometimes even, I think the most people I had on a panel was like eight, which looking back is kind of insane. So all that to say, I have mastered the art of adapting and just like flexing things because I'm a big believer that things are meant to evolve over time. So I hope that answers your question. Let me, if you have another question or add-on question, feel free to just drop it in the chat. Okay, let's see. What opportunities do you think creators are sleeping on right now that will matter even more in 2026? Ooh, I love that. Let's see. Opportunity. Okay, you guys know I'm always going to be a big LinkedIn agenda pusher, which is like the thing that I always say. And obviously, you guys are on LinkedIn, so you know this. But I think the thing about LinkedIn is like when I think about LinkedIn, being a LinkedIn creator or just building a personal brand on LinkedIn, I don't just look at LinkedIn as this place to create content. I also look at it as a means to get additional opportunities. So I feel like if you're just using it for content creation, think beyond. Think about the networking you can actually do on this platform and all the people that you have access to that you probably wouldn't otherwise have access to. Another thing I would say that's not LinkedIn related and more general to like just being a business owner or a creatorpreneur, I would say the speaking opportunities, but more specifically at like universities and schools. That's something that I've recently been getting into lately. And it's just not something that I considered before or saw myself doing. Because I think typically my brain has been so trained to think like speaking engagements mean like conferences, but that's not necessarily the case. So even last night, I spoke at Spelman College in Atlanta. If you guys aren't familiar with Spelman, it's a Black women only university, which is a historically Black college. And then I also spoke at my alma mater, Georgia State University, at the top of the month. And those are kind of like the newer opportunities that I've been getting that I've been having a lot of fun with. Okay, another question. Do you operate as an LLC or 1099 with your contracts? Both, los dos. So I do operate as an LLC. I've had my LLC for about 3.5 years now. But that also does not negate me working as a 1099. Sometimes I just work as a 1099 with my business. Usually I work as a 1099. Sometimes I work on W-2 as like a temporary employee, technically. I have a contract right now where I'm a temporary employee and they have me on W-2. I work with them for like 30 hours a week with an agency. And then for the most part, the majority of my contracts are 1099 still, even as an LLC owner. Typically what I find is that when I have my contracts with either my clients or my brand partners, they ask me if they want the contract to be with me or my LLC. And I always say my LLC because I want all that income that I'm getting to be funneled through my business. Hopefully that was helpful and clear. Let's see. What is your advice around creating a newsletter from basic layout, topics, and a workflow, research to publishing? So let's start with the layout and topics. Well, actually, no, let's start with the content. So with the content, I like to look at newsletter content very similarly in the way that I think about social content. I like to think of like an overarching topic or theme. So your like content pillar, and then break out the, I guess, like discussions or the things that I want to elaborate on in my newsletter from there. So, for example, the newsletter I sent out this morning, if you're not subscribed, subscribe. But the newsletter I sent out this morning was about speaking engagements. And there's a lot of directions I can go into on the topic of speaking, public speaking. But this one, I was like, I want to talk about how I am how people can actually go about getting paid speaking opportunities in 2026. And I've actually written a newsletter prior to this one's that's very similar, but the framing is a little bit different. So I think the first one was more so about like, where you can find paid opportunities. And this one is like how you can go and get them. So it's just like that kind of switch up in terms of content. And then how I structure my newsletter is based on like what I kind of like to think about like the reader's journey. So I always kick off my newsletter with like a big hero image, which I feel like paints the image for what the newsletter is going to be about. It should obviously be relevant to your email subject line as well. And then I go into like kind of my spiel. It's like my personal story, my personal relationship to whatever topic that I'm discussing. And then from there, I do a section that's like tips or just like things that could be helpful to my audience. Cause I know in my head, if someone's reading my newsletter, they're like, Jade, I don't actually don't want to read anything that you have to say about your personal story. Just give me the tips. So I feel like I like to break it out into sections so that people can get what they want. And then I go into like typically something that I'm promoting. It could be an event that I'm attending or a brand partnership that I have or something that I feel like people should know. And then before, I was also curating this list of like events, opportunities, resources that I would often put in my newsletter. I've since moved those to the Creator Tea Talk website. If you guys didn't see that on one of my recent posts, you can also find it on my LinkedIn, well, Creator Tea Talks page on their LinkedIn newsletter. So you can access those opportunities. So just think about the reader's journey and like how you may think that people want to like find that information in your newsletter. Because I just always operated under the assumption that people are not reading my newsletter from top to bottom. Hopefully that was helpful. Let's see. For your speaking gigs, because you are all in all of the industries and universities, how are you tailoring your talks to each? Do you change it up fully or is there some magic we need to know? That's a great question. So I definitely change up my speaking topics to the different audiences that I speak to. I find that when I'm speaking to colleges and universities, because they're students and they're a lot younger, I try not to go so granular. It's like high level concepts and then leave a lot of room for Q&A, because in those types of audiences, I find that people really want more personalized questions and want to talk more about the career journey, just to have that picture painted for them about how I got here. So typically, I find that when I'm talking to students, it's more like, how did I get into the creator economy? How did I get into my career? How did I go from point A to point B? Where if I'm talking to typically more like marketing professionals who are more familiar with the work of marketing or a little bit more seasoned in their career, the topic may be like, how do I get this social strategy approved by a CMO? Like that's not the experience someone in college is having. So again, very similar to social content, you want to tailor your talks to the type of audience that you're speaking to. How should a micro influencer spend the remainder of 2025 if they're closing out the year with any upcoming paid deals? So I think I have two answers to this. So make sure you just get your affairs in order. If you're closing out the year with deals, just making sure you're staying on top of your deliverables. You kind of check those, P's and Q's, make sure you look back at your contracts, your briefs, and make sure your projects with your brand partners are settled. And then I would also say, queue up just like the conversation for opportunities for next year. Like you can wrap up a current project or just be in the process of wrapping up a current project and then start saying, okay, well, I know we're going on for the holidays, but would love to hear what you guys have planned for Q1. Because that way you can at least start planning according to based on what they're doing. And then top of the new year, be like, welcome back from vacation, guys, or welcome back from the holidays. I have a pitch for you. And it's like fresh and right there. Ideally, you can get it out now, like before we get deeper into December. That way they can even possibly extend some of their leftover Q4 budget, which a lot of brands are like trying to get rid of right now. Or they can at least get a sense for how much that's going to cost so that they can plan for a budget the New Year's. This is something I've done with some of my longer term brand partners. I'll be like, I have a couple of ideas that I'd love to do in Q1, sending it to you now in Q4 so you can get that budget ready. And then the second answer to that is like, make sure that like you're closing the year with peace. That's my like healthy mental health answer. That's something I'm trying to do. I have a hard boundary right now where I'm telling everybody, my clients and my brand partners, Jayde Powell is out of office in December, baby. Once December 1st hit, can't talk to me no more. You got to talk to my manager. So both sides, close out with like the business strategy, of course, but also think about your mental health. So speaking of the newsletter, I started doing those Q4 pitches, but do you include your full proposal in the pitch or do you ask if they're interested? I'm trying to make my outreach more effective. Great question, Christopher. So that's actually in reference to something that I shared in my newsletter, I think last week or the week before, in a recent post that I made about getting your pitches out now in Q4. So what I would say is like, I don't like to upfront a lot in the initial pitch email or the pitch message that I'm sending to potential brand partners. For me, it's more so like, hey, I'm interested. I have a couple of ideas. Can we get on the phone? That's what my goal is, to make sure that like I can get some FaceTime and then have that ability to have the conversation so you can get a sense of like what they're working on, if there's any campaigns that they're focused on, any product pushes or services pushes that they really want to prioritize going into the new year. Well, at this point, going into the new year. So I would say in those pitches, like the only things you really need to have are just like simplistic pitch, but include links to like, the things that they would be helpful, maybe a media kit, or if you've taken some of my courses, you've seen that I've talked a lot about a partnerships deck. So either a media kit or a partnerships deck, maybe some metrics from previous campaigns that you've done. I have that all in a Notion board for me. And then just like any specific like high level things that you might be interested or want to speak to. But I just like to have the call just because like I may have a lot of ideas for them, but if it's like not relevant to them because they're focused on specific campaigns, it doesn't matter. So at least work towards having the conversation. That way you can say, okay, here's the specific ideas or things that I want to do with you guys. Hopefully that makes sense, Christopher. Okay, Hannah asked, what would you tell a creator who's rebuilding or reimagining their brand going into the new year? So I would say that you don't have to get too tactical, which I feel like is what most people wouldn't say. But I say that because I often feel like when we're kind of growing into this space where it's like, okay, I want to rethink how I'm doing things or I want to take a new approach, we get a little too planny and then it like prevents us from doing the reimagining, which is unfortunate. And that's not what we're trying to do. If there's anything I would say start making a list of like things that you feel like answer the question, why do I want to reimagine this work that I'm doing? And what is it that I'm hoping to, I guess, like realize in this like 2.0 or new version of this? And I think if you're able to answer those couple questions in a list, that will help you figure out what that reimagination looks like. So for example, again, when I did the rebrand, I was like, one of the things for me is like, while Creator Tea Talk was having a lot of successes on its own, I was like, I feel like it's not this brand that people can really deeply describe without me being like, this is what Creator Tea Talk is. So that's how I knew that it was time to reimagine the Creator Tea Talk brand, especially because of the way it evolved over time this year. And a lot of that was just like, okay, I'm going to hit these 2 points. One, it needs its own website because it was kind of like this back-ended page on my website that no one really visited. And then people would ask me for information and I'd be like, oh, you have to go to jaydepowell.com/. And it was just a lot going on. And then two, think about just like the top 3 things that you feel like you need immediately to get that done. So again, website. So I needed a designer, new brand kit, and then just like an understanding of what the purpose of that website and what it would serve and who it would serve. I hope that answers your question. I mean, I'm getting real yappy over here, y'all. Okay, perfect. So Kofo asked, for a new freelancer just starting out, do you have any advice on the best way to position ourselves for jobs and opportunities? So I feel like when you're a freelancer, I wouldn't say it's easy to get opportunities, but I would say you definitely have to take a little bit more of a proactive approach. That's been my experience. Like the beautiful thing about having a social presence is like you get pushed into opportunities because of like your network and your referrals and your community, which is really great. But in the times where I've really struggled finding freelance gigs, I've really had to like go on the pitch kind of side. Like it's almost like operating as a traditional agency where you're pitching to brands to win their business. Same way you're pitching to clients. So what I would do is first make sure you have like an updated portfolio, as updated as possible. To be very honest, I've not updated my portfolio in like 3 years. But I haven't had to because my social presence does most of the work for me, thank God. But update your portfolio and then think about like the type of clients that you want to work with as a freelancer, and then just get on LinkedIn and start like reaching out to these people that work at the brands. Like I'm going to assume you work in marketing. Let me see if I can see. I can't see it from your tagline, what you do, but I see create something. So I'm going to assume creative strategist, creator, something creative. And then really start reaching out to those people and see what opportunities are available. One of the hacks that I have is like I follow a lot of agency recruiters because that's who I typically work with. So I follow people that work in talent acquisition, recruitment, and I'm like constantly stalking their profiles to see like what opportunities pop up. But if I'm not doing that necessarily, I'm just like reaching out and saying like, hey, I'm Jade. I'm a freelancer. I do social strategy, content creation, creative direction. Here's my portfolio. If there's any opportunities, please let me know. Another tip I'll give too is that some brands and agencies on their websites, they have like a general talent form. So let's say like you want to work at ABC agency. If you go to their careers page, this is not every website, but oftentimes I see this. If you go to their careers page, they'll have like a general interest or talent form. You just fill that out and tell them like what you do, what you have the capacity for, how much time you're willing to give them, what type of work you like to do, a link to your portfolio, and then that way you're in their system. So if they do have opportunities available, you'll be one of the first they'll call. Okay, let's see. What's something you wish more brands would include in their initial deliverable briefs? Um, to be honest, like I would love to see brands get more clear about like the goals. And I feel like when I receive a brief, because I'm of two mindsets. I do think brief should be general so that you're not distracting the creative from doing their job. Because I do feel like when you put too much information in the brief, it gets a little convoluted. I know with me that kind of like messes up my process because I'm like trying to do what's expected of me versus trusting my instincts. But I would say an understanding of the goal, because I feel like when brands are working internally, like they might be working towards like something specific. Like let's say I'm being looped in for like this holiday campaign. What I want to know is like, yes, of course you're telling me like we're doing a holiday campaign and we're hoping to drive more sales of this holiday product. Like I get that, but what I want to know is like why this campaign came to life from the beginning. Like what was the conversation that you guys were having internally that was like, you know what? We should get some influencers to do this. That is actually helpful for me. And most brands won't do that because it's like too much information technically. But that's why I always love to get on a call for a briefing so that I can ask those questions and be like, give me like the root intention for this campaign or this brief. And that way I can like think about I feel like it allows me to kind of expand my ideas around what the creative could look like beyond just like, here are the talking points we want to hit, which is like fine. But to me, that's like, I'm like, give me the meat. You're giving me the sauce, but I'm like, I want the real. But you know what I mean? Hopefully that answered your question. Okay, no problem. Bye, Alexis. Okay, and I think I saw a question earlier. Let me see if I can find it because I may have skipped over it. Mm-mm-mm. Let's see. I answered that one. Okay, here we go. Zoe, as a social media coordinator looking to shift into creator program coordination, what would you say are some misconceptions about the transferability of skills? AKA, what could those of shifting think more deeply about as we pivot? So going from social media coordinator to creator program coordination, what would you say about are some of the misconceptions? Okay. So I think the misconception comes from the fact that like those are two different jobs. So the assumption is like, oh, you work in social media, you should be able to do a creator program, and you should be able to do social media if you've worked in a creator program. They are two different jobs, and while I feel like there is a lot of overlap, one thing I try to remind people who are like interested in creator marketing and influencer marketing is that creator and influencer marketing doesn't start and stop with social. Like it goes beyond social. Social is just like one of the many touch points. Like we can use influencers for email marketing. That has nothing to do with social. You know what I mean? So I say that because I feel like if you're going from social and getting into creator programs, you just kind of have to think beyond the world of social. Like social is such a great foundation for like any type of marketing, in my opinion, because I feel like that's one of the ways that you have direct access to the consumer. So you just have like a different viewpoint in your approach to marketing. But when you start entering into the world of creator, of course, social is going to be a huge part of it, but that's not the only place it lives. So I would say just start thinking about the way creators and influencers can be incorporated into other sides of marketing. So brush up on like brand campaigns where they leverage influencers and creators for events, email marketing, website content. That would be like UGC, display ads, like literally anything that's not social, because you already have the social foundation. It's just kind of like brushing up on those other things additionally. Um, and then, yeah, I think I answered that second part, what you should be thinking about. Yeah, I think that is. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's see. For pitching, this is new to me and so complicated. How can I simplify it? So, pitching sounds scary because we call it pitching, to be honest. But the best way to think about it is you are just sending an email or sending a DM, really. Like, real pitching is like, I feel like has come out of the ad industry because we're like presenting these long presentations to like executives, but that's not really necessarily how like creator pitching works. Like, if you are a creator or even a freelancer, pitching is really just like, I would say, sending an email to inquire interest, if that makes sense. All you're doing is saying, hi, I have a service, I have an offering, I'm very good at this thing. Would you be interested in it? And the pitch part of like convincing someone to work with you, I would reframe it as just like, you are simply looking to see if there is interest. I feel like that has taken a lot of the pressure off of feeling like, oh my God, I have to like, do this big pitch or this big presentation to this brand partner that I want to work with. It's really not that deep. I promise. Like, you're literally just asking questions, and that's just like the industry we're in. So most people will expect it. So oftentimes my pitch is like, for example, I'll actually talk about my recent Descript partnership. I don't know if you guys saw that. Descript is one of my favorite video editing platforms. I've been using them for years. And I've been dying to work with them. And I remember I saw that they were doing ads with some creators on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, that means they're in the LinkedIn game. So now is my time. So I think I found someone who works in like community management at Descript or on the social media team. And I was just like, hey, I'm interested in partnering with Descript. Are you the right person to talk to? And they were like, no, I'm not. And I was like, okay. And then they were like, but I can direct you to the right person that is. And I said, great. So I found, they sent me to that person's email. I sent an email and I literally, subject line was shooting my shot. That was the subject line. And I was like, hi, I'm Jade. I'm a big fan of Descript. Have been using your platform for years. Would love to hear if there's any opportunities to team up as a creator or influencer. And I got the gig. It was really that simple. And I think, in terms of like what you should be sending them, they will ask. The only proactive approach I would say, again, is what I mentioned to Christopher before. Have that media kit ready. Have those like previous analytics. And if you're a freelancer, that would be your portfolio. But if a creator, your analytics for previous content that you've created. And then just be prepared to answer the questions that they may ask. But that's really all you need. Hopefully that answers your question. How much can you get paid with 4K on LinkedIn and 1.3K on TikTok? I'm going to be very honest, y'all. You can get paid as much as you ask for. I feel like that's the answer people hate to hear. But I'm going to say this as someone who is constantly in like brand campaigns with people who have like double or triple my following, yet I make more. It's because I ask for what I want. So I wouldn't even say like your follower count necessarily determines how much money you make. I always think about it from the lens of like, what is the creative output that I am producing in this engagement with this potential brand partner? It doesn't matter how many followers I have, because the reality is what they're investing in, at least for me, is my creative production skills and my ability to draw attention on the timeline. So that's the investment that they're making. So when I work with brand partners, I'm not thinking, okay, I have 32,000 followers on LinkedIn, and for every 1,000 followers, I'm going to charge $1,000. I'm thinking, they asked me for 2 pieces of content. I'm thinking about my time that it's going to take, the quality of production I'm putting in, the fact that they're using my face, the fact that I'm coming up with original content specifically for them, the fact that this isn't going to be an original ad. That's where the money is. But to give a number, I personally feel no creator at the micro level should be charging anything less than $2,500. Like that's bare minimum across the board, in my opinion. So start there, work your way up, and then charge double, especially if you're a woman, because women tend to undersell themselves. Okay. As someone just getting started as a content creator, it has been hard to land some pitches because many brands are focused on follower counts rather than leaning into the power of nano creators. Do you have any tips or tricks to get around brands just asking about follower count? So that is one of the tricky things to what I just alluded to about working in this industry. A lot of brands are very follower count obsessed. So that's where I feel like you have to focus on the value that you bring. Like this is like hard to prove up front, but when I first started as a creator, that's where like testimonials were very important for me. Getting some of my existing brand partners to be able to say like, this is the experience I had working with Jayde, because to me that carries, well, in my experience, I've seen it carries a lot of weight, because there's there's this mindset of like, once you have like, you know, millions and hundreds of thousands of followers, it's like all these opportunities come in. But the reality is like, you're only going to be able to lock in on those opportunities and work with brands in like longer terms, more sustainable ways if you have professionalism and you have like great ideas. So that's what I feel like should be the focus. And let's say like more tactically, you really want to get into the door with a brand, but they're just like, no, you don't have enough followers. Offer to do something for free. That's not something I would say do for everyone, but for the brands that you really want to work with, be like, okay, for starters, I'll work with you on an organic video, 30 seconds max, and I'll post it on my Instagram. And if you really like it, then then we can start talking about money for paid amplification. So like do the organic video for free, do a 30-60 second video. And if they really like it and they're like, you know what, this could be a great ad, that's your time to upsell and be like, okay, let's turn it into an ad, 30 days of usage, $2,500. At least start there. Okay. Oh, you say you got $100 for one post. No, ma'am. We don't do that here. No, ma'am. At this stage in the creator economy, no more $100 content, because that's not fair to you. Any tips on strategy for knowing when to reach out to brands and where to find castings? You may have covered it, but I joined later. No problems. Welcome. So for knowing when to reach out to brands, I would say reach out to brands year round. But I do feel like in terms of like how businesses run and operate, the sweet spot is going to be Q4 and Q1. Q4, just because a lot of brands are getting rid of their budget towards the end of the year. So like every year marketers are given this budget from like their CFO/CMO. And it's like, okay, they have to go plan campaigns based around this budget. And it's very rare that they're getting budget increases throughout the year. So they're usually going to be a little bit more frugal in the beginning of the year. And because they're like, I'm trying to make sure I have more runway as the year goes by. And then what happens is Q4 comes and they're like, oh shit, I got like $50,000 left out of this like, you know, $100,000 budget or $250,000 budget that I have, and they have to spend it or else they're not going to get the same amount or more budget next year. So Q4 is a really sweet time. Like I feel like even right now, I'm like trying to work through 6 contracts and brand partnerships that I'm trying to wrap up before December right now. So definitely Q4 and then Q1, just because that's when a lot of brands are kind of planning for what their year is going to look like. And that's a good time to kind of get in and be like, hey, what are you guys thinking about? And start pitching your ideas. Okay. Jane said, could you break down the 2,500 recommended minimum? How did you come to that number? Honestly, vibes. Honestly, vibes. But it's also just because I have been working in the industry for a while. Like I used to hire creators, and I want to say one of the brands I used to work for, it was this beverage brand based on San Francisco. And this was like 2021. At that time, 500 was like the bare minimum across every creator that I've worked with. And that was like a small startup where I had a $15,000 budget and most creators were charging $500. So 3, 4, 5 years later, where the creator economy is a multi-billion-dollar industry, 500 plus 500 plus 500 plus 500. It's vibes plus math. So that's where I would say the number comes from. It's like we're accounting for inflation as the market increases, basically. Hopefully that helps. And then outside of the agency recruiters, anyone else in the marketing team you usually reach out to. So for freelance work, it's usually recruiters, but I'll in my work specifically because I'm more of like a social creative. So my work touches strategy and creative. So I'm typically reaching out to strategy directors and creative directors because they're the ones that I would typically be working more closely with. But it really depends on what your role is. So let's say hypothetically, you're a copywriter. You'd probably reach out to the person who is an art director, comma copy, or a creative director, comma copy. It's really just like thinking about who would be in the position that like you would be reporting to. Those are typically the people that you would want to reach out to. But if you're a creator, it looks a little bit differently, excuse me. The people you want to reach out to are the people that like touch creator programming. That could be a lot of people, again, to my point earlier. But usually in my experience, it's social media manager. Like they oftentimes have people who are specific towards creator and influencer. So someone who has creator influencer in their title, it could be a marketing director, it could be a creator partnerships manager, it could be influencer marketing manager, social media manager. Those I feel like are the kind of like titles that would probably get you the closer to an opportunity. Okay, we have 10, we're like 10 minutes over, but I'm going to keep going until 5:45 and then I'm going to hang it up. Okay. Any tips on what to do if the content that you created for a client doesn't perform well? How do you deal with their possible frustration? That is an excellent question that I have a great answer to. So, if you are working with a brand partner, they are so excited, they've invested this money into you, and you created your content, you posted it, and it flops. What you're going to do, this has happened to me. What you're going to do is say, hey, well, first of all, you're not going to tell them that there was an issue with the content because they might have like their own internal metrics or case for what's successful in terms of content. So you're gonna wait to see if they flag it or if they had like if you guys previously discussed specific goals. So what I like to do is I'm like, hey, like how do you think the content performed? Like that gives you the answer to that question gives you a semblance of like if you actually need to say anything at all. Because in our contracts, like we're not guaranteeing specific results. There's no way we can because we can't control the nature of social media. If you are signing contracts that are requiring you to guarantee a certain results, don't do that. But anyway, I say all that to say that like once I have an understanding and like let's say they are disappointed or they're like, oh, the content didn't perform as well as we thought it did. I always think about like the ways that I can like sell them or give them something for free. So I don't necessarily like reshoot content or republish content, but what I'll do instead is like offer another channel. So let's say if it makes sense, I'll be like, okay, I'll post this on my Instagram and we'll see if it works there. But let's say it's not that type of content that can work for my Instagram audience. I'll say, okay, how about I give you 30 days of paid usage for free? Because that's not going to bother me, And like maybe the paid amplification will help. And in some cases it has. Or let's say, you have a different channel for content. Like I'll say, okay, or channel, yeah, a different channel for content. So I'm like, okay, it didn't perform as well here, but let me incorporate this link that you gave me into my newsletter. So just think of ways to like, I guess this is a terrible way to describe it, but like reverse upsell the content so that they can feel like they're getting more bang for their buck. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. I keep telling myself it's too late to pitch for Q4. Is it? No, because Q4 ain't over yet, Bookie. I feel like the hard line is probably going to be the week of and maybe like the week and a half before Christmas. But I think up until like the 15th of December, you can keep pitching, honestly. And I would even want to say even up until the 20th, honestly. You can pitch all the way up until then. And then I would say anything past that point, people are already in holiday mode. They ain't thinking about us right now. So if you have a pitch, if you have a pitch ready, December 20th, I would feel like is a good deadline to give yourself. But really December 15th, try to get it out by then. What are other contract red flags like guaranteed results on creative? Great question. So one thing about me is I love to redline a contract and be like, no. I'm always very pro like redline the contract until you feel super happy with it. So some red flags I look for. use in perpetuity. So basically, that means like they can take my content and use it in whatever way they want to forever, as long as they want to. I always negotiate that. So I try to do specific usage terms. So, like, let's say 30 days, 60 days, or up to a year, depending on what type of content it is. And then I would say another red flag is like the payment terms. So basically, like some contracts have it where um they won't pay me until like I submit analytics or the content is published, which is pretty typical. But something I've been trying to negotiate lately more is getting my invoice submitted when I actually submit the drafts of my content. So, like, well, not even the drafts, just like my content. Because technically, once I submit it to them, they have it. So I don't always feel like it should be dependent on when I post the content, because sometimes those deadlines move. I remember one time I was working with a brand and they kept pushing the date for publishing, and I was like, well, this is, holding up me getting paid because you guys keep pushing the date, even though I was ready to create and post this content and have already submitted it to you. So that's another red flag. And then I would say one-sided identification. So there's typically an identification clause that basically just says, if you do anything embarrassing on the timeline, or if your ad or your post causes any backlash towards the brand, they can sue you. But I like to make that mutual. You know what I mean? So let's say the brand embarrasses me, they need to pay up too. So I like to negotiate mutual identification and put that into the clause. Those are like two things that I can think of my head right on the top of my head right now. But this is also something I should put in my newsletter. So thank you for asking that question. Okay, let's see. Well, actually, I don't think I have any more questions. This is perfect time. And we're right at 5:45. Thank you guys for coming to my AMA. I've never actually done an AMA on LinkedIn before, so I was curious how this was going to go. But I do hope this was very helpful. And again, I would encourage you to visit the Creator Tea Talk website at creatorteatalk.com and go to the resources page, where you can find a lot more information about the things that I discuss here, including a link to my newsletter, because that's where I get really deep into a lot of the topics that I discuss on LinkedIn. But thanks, y'all. Again, this is the last Creator Tea Talk of the season. Oh my God. And we will be back probably like February, March. Stay tuned. It's really dependent on when I feel like it.